Franklyn's comment on the Georgics by Virgil. Today and over the next fortnight we'll hear the 4 books of the Georgics in the verse translation by Robert Wells. The Roman world is beginning to emerge from a long period of civil war, and Virgil's expositions of the arts of agriculture are also a celebration of the arts of peace, from which the echo of war is seldom absent. Octavian is recently returned from his final defeat of Antony. Under the title of Caesar, Octavian is invoked in the poem both as patron of the farmers' labourers and as guardian of the peace. Book 1 of the Georgics speaks of the tilling of the fields and of the cultivation of the crops. The reader is John Franklyn-Robbins.
What livens the fields? At the prompting of what star the earth should be turned, and vines be joined to elms? The breeding of sheep and cattle, the care of the herd, and how to profit by the sweet reserve of bees. These are my themes, Maecenas. Clear lights of heaven, you stars that draw the seasons across the sky, Bacchus and kindly Ceres, you by whose grace the earth exchanged Dodona's acorns for bread, and mixed plain water with the juice of the grape. You fauns and dryads who fill the woods and fields with your living presence, come close and bless my poem. I make it of your gifts. You, ranger of the hills, whose milk-white cattle browse on the thickets of Chia, you, Neptune, for whom earth opened at a trident stroke, and the whinnying horse leapt into being, come close. Great Pan, protector of the shepherd and the flock, now leave the coombs of Lycaeus, your ancient home, to wait on my poem. And you, boy-lord of the plough, Minerva, inventor of the olive tree, old Silvanus, the cypress sapling uprooted in your careful hand, you gods and goddesses who watch over the fields, who have in your care the fruits that spring up unsown and send down rain to water the planted crops. And you, who must soon be counted among the gods, by which of your powers, Caesar, are you to be known? Shall willing nations be gathered beneath your sway, and the wide world welcome you as lord of the harvest, your forehead wreathed with myrtle, your mother's crown? Will you come to us as god of the boundless sea, the sailor's deity, distant Thule your servant? Shall Tethys court you for son with a dowry of waves? Shall a new star rise across the summer sky where the scorpion pulls in his arms to make a space in the zodiac's arc, and the grieving maid withdraws? In whatever shape of power you choose to come, yet Tartarus shall never have you for its king, nor your ambition be touched by so dark a wish. Though Greece is lost in longing for Elysian fields, and Proserpine forgets her mother and her home, sanction my bold adventure, since you share my pity for the countryman, ignorant of the land he works. We need your presence. Be faithful to our need. In early spring, when snow melts away on the hills and the soil softens at the touch of the west wind, let your bulls begin to groan as the plough cuts deep and the share be worn by the furrow so that it shines. The land which answers the farmer's jealous hopes must lie exposed twice over to sun and frost. At last the gathered harvest will burst the barns. But before you set the plough to unbroken ground, take trouble to find out the nature of the place, its quirks of wind and weather, its well-tried ways, since each spot differs in what it bears or rejects. One spot suits corn, another grapes, yet another plantations of trees, and grass that needs no planting. To India we look for ivory, to soft Sabir for frankincense, to Epirus for champion mares, to Pontus for beaver's gall, to Tmolus for saffron, to the Calibers naked at the forge for steel. This is the law that nature has laid from the first on certain places. The contract stands unchanged, since Deucalion threw stones into the empty world and men rose up and entered on their hard lives. To work, then. Where the soil is rich, start ploughing in the first months of the year. Let dusty summer bake the stiff-backed clods with its fierce beams, or grass and weeds will hinder the growing crop. Where the soil is poor, wait till Arcturus rises, then turn it up lightly with a shallow furrow. Though loose and sandy, it will keep the moisture it has. Every second year your land should lie fallow. Let the fields grow rough and hard from lack of use, or else, as the seasons shift, plant other crops, where vetch or bitter lupine or quivering beans possessed the ground, a delicate undergrowth of rustling stalks. Sow yellow corn instead. A crop of oats or flax or somnolent poppies, unvaried from year to year, burns up the earth, but grown alternately, they will do no harm if you cover the parched acres with fattening dung and scatter ashes across the exhausted soil. For the fields also, a change is as good as a rest, and better than no return from unploughed land. It is often helpful to fire the empty fields. The tall stubble goes up in a splutter of flames. Perhaps this strengthens the earth and makes it rich with some hidden nourishment, or perhaps the burning gets rid of rottenness and superfluous damp. Perhaps heat loosens the soil, opening the pores so that sap can find its way into the new grass, or hardens it to resist the extremes of weather, sealing the ground against thin, constant rain or piercing frost, or the heat of the rapid sun. Once ploughing has broken the earth into heavy clods, work it with mattock and wicker harrow. Let Ceres look down from Olympus, tumbling her yellow hair. Or turn your plough against the stiff-backed ridges, driving it crosswise over the furrowed ground. Take command of the fields, and set them to work. A farmer prays for wet summers and mild winters. After a dusty summer, the corn grows strongest. Then wealthy Mysia boasts her richest harvests, and Gargarus marvels as the slopes embrown. He does not count on the weather. The seed once sown, he rushes the mounded ramparts, beats them down, and channels water to freshen the sandy soil. As scorching heat starts to wither the young crop, he diverts the stream where it runs above his fields. It leaps with a throaty rush down the dried-out course and spreads in gentle wellings, cooling the earth. To keep the grain from growing too heavy for the stalk, he thins its richness by grazing early in the year, before the blade tops the furrow. Any marshy patch he drains by sinking a trench of sand and gravel, especially where, in unsettled months, a torrent pours down, covering a stretch of ground with mud and leaving shallow pools to fester in the sun. But the labour of men and oxen in turning the earth is only part of the task. You must reckon the damage that birds can do, the crane and gluttonous goose, tough-rooted weeds, thick shade. The first rule in farming is that you are never to hope for an easy way. The land demands your effort. Body and mind are sharpened that undisturbed would grow vague with sloth. Before Jupiter's reign, the fields had no masters. Even to mark out land and divide it with bounds was unlawful. No one took thought of yours or mine, while the generous earth gave enough for every need. Jupiter first put the poison in black snakes, set wolves marauding, set the calm sea heaving, shook honey off the leaves, took fire away, and stopped the wine that ran everywhere in streams, so that men, by slow experience, should learn the skills by which they live, plant furrows, wait for corn, and strike from flint the fire hidden in its veins. Boats of hollowed alder were launched on the rivers. Sailors numbered the stars and gave them names, the Pleiades, the Hyades, Arctos, Lycaon's bright daughter. Now men discovered how to surround steep combes with hunting dogs, to trap animals, to lime birds, to lash the stream's deep pools with casting nets, and to haul their heavy tackle through the sea. Tempered iron and the saw's shrill blade were used, where before wood fell apart to a tap on a wedge. and one by one the laborious skills were mastered by which men shaped the world to their own ends. Ceres taught men to turn the earth with a plough. In the grove at Dodona, acorns and arbutus failed. The old diet and old haunts were no longer enough, and the pain of a blighted harvest had still to be learnt. Soon mildew attacked the corn, eating at the stalks. Tares bristled in the unkempt fields. A prickly growth of burrs and caltrops sprang up as the crops died. Wild oats and thistles stood thick above the grain. Then keep weeds down with your mattock, scare the birds with shouts, thin out the shade cast by your trees with a sharp billhook, and call down rain with your prayers, or be ready to suffer the sight of your neighbour's harvest, and look in the woods under shaken oaks for your own. I will speak now of the weapons used in this war, without which crops could neither be sown nor raised. First the share, and the curved ploughs, heavy timber, and the slow wagons that bring the harvest home. Then weighty mattocks, sledges and drags for threshing, and wooden hurdles, the common wicker baskets of Demeter's priest, and the winnowing fan of Iacchus. You must have all these in store and ready for use, if country honours are ever to be yours by right. Look in the woods for an elm that has grown crooked, its trunk forced into the plough-stock's bending shape. To this a pole should be fastened 8 foot long, beneath 2 boards and a double ridge of share beams. Use linden for the yoke, since it weighs lightly. Beech for the handle to guide and turn the plough. Hang the wood over your hearth for smoke to season. I can pass on to you many ancient maxims, if your attention admits such modest cares. The threshing floor must be levelled with a heavy roller, dug over and the surface packed hard with clay to keep back grass and to stop it from cracking and crumbling. Various pests will make inroads. The tiny mouse will set up his home and his granary underground. The blind mole will move into digs at your expense. The earth's recesses swarm with vermin. Toads squat in dank hollows. Weevils and scurrying ants, putting by for old age, ravage great heaps of corn. When the walnut breaks into flower among the woods, and catkins with their strong scent hang along its branches, look closely. If most of the blossoms come to fruit, you can hope for a sweltering summer and a busy harvest. But if the foliage is only rich in shade, then chaff and straw will mock the thresher's labour. I have often seen men drench seeds before sowing with carbonate of soda and the black leaves of oil, to give substance to the bean pod's promise, a crop which swells and softens boiled on a gentle fire. I have seen how seeds that are sorted with the utmost care will degenerate, unless every year the task of picking out the largest one by one is repeated. Everything tends to the worse if left to itself. The current tugs, and the man straining at the oars to hold his craft to make a little headway is swept downstream if he rests his arms for a moment. Bound to the land, we must keep as careful an eye on the stars, Arcturus, the kids, and the bright dragon, as sailors who work their way homeward across high seas from stormy Pontus and the oyster-bearing straits. When Libra balances the hours of night and day, and the world lies half in light and half in shadow, set your bulls ploughing, sow the fields with barley, till the weather breaks and drives you from your work. Now too is the time for planting flax and poppy. So long as your ground is workable, lean at the plough, though heavily laden clouds lie low in the sky. Spring is the season for sowing beans and millet, and the soil left fallow lies ready for lucerne. The bright bull opens the year. His horns are gilded in triumph, and the dog backs away as he comes on. But if you work the ground for a harvest of wheat or hardy spelt, and your whole concern is for grain, wait till the Pleiads hide themselves in the morning, and the Cretan girl has lost her burning crown, before you commit to the furrow its due of seed, or trust too early the hope earth cannot share. Many begin before Maya's setting, but the harvest turns to wild oats from lying too long in the soil. If you choose to sow kidney beans or Egyptian lentils or vetch, and do not despise such homely crops, then take the bearkeeper's setting as a sure sign. Start sowing, and continue till the frosts grow sharp. To mark the seasons, the sun divides his journey, stage by stage, through heaven's 12 constellations. 5 zones make up the sky: a tropic zone that flushes and quivers in the heat of the sun. Round this, at either extreme, extends a region locked in blue cliffs of ice and dark with storms. But the temperate zones, else we should not survive, are ours by divine gift, and through them runs a slanted path where the signs of the zodiac turn. Heaven rises northward over the Scythian hills and falls away, sloping to Libya and the south. One pole stands high above us, the other lies hidden beneath our feet, with dark sticks and the shades. In our sky the dragon twists and winds his coils like a river between the great and lesser bear, stars scared to plunge in ocean that will not set. But there, some believe, one season dark and silent holds the sky. Night's shadow never thins, or else the dawn returns from us, bringing the light. And the breath of the sun's horses, our morning breeze, means dusk there, and the kindling of the evening star. Skies shift, and weathers change. What the stars teach is a pattern in the change, when to sow and to reap, when to strike with oars the sea's delusive glitter, when to launch and rig the ships laid up for winter, when to fell the forest pine that frames the ships. We are wise to know these signs, their setting and rising, and the balance of seasons through the varied year. When rain keeps him indoors, the farmer has time for the odd jobs which would have to be done in a hurry if the weather were clear. He hammers out the point of a blunted ploughshare, or hollows wooden troughs, or marks his cattle, or sorts his sacks of grain. He sharpens stakes and forked props, and prepares thin willow twigs to fasten and train his vines. This is the time for weaving baskets from briars, for grinding corn and drying it over the hearth. There are jobs that can be properly undertaken even on festival days. No scruple forbids you to water your fields, or mend a broken hedge. You can fire the brambles, or set snares for birds, or dip your loud flock in clear running water. On these days also a farmer goes to market, loading his slow donkey with oil or apples, and brings back a ridged millstone or lump of pitch. There are certain days, determined by the moon, which help or hinder work. Watch out for the 5th. Pale Orcus and the Furies were born that day, and monstrous Typhon, and the giant sons of earth, who swore that heaven should be broken by their hate. 3 times they tried to pile Ossa on Pelion, then heave Olympus with its woods up Ossa's side. 3 thunderbolts from Jupiter destroyed their work. The 17th day is lucky for planting vines, for taming oxen, or setting a web in the loom. The 9th is good for runaways, bad for thieves. Some work is better done in the cool of the night, or early in the morning when the dew is shot with beams. You should cut light stubble and mow your hay fields then, since at night the moist air softens the dry stalks. One man I think of especially, who stays up late cutting torches with his knife by the winter firelight, while his wife sings as she works to the sharp accompaniment of the shuttle running to and fro across the web, or boils down sugary must to make a syrup, skimming the foam with leaves from the trembling cauldron. But sunburnt Ceres goes reaping in the heat of the day. In the heat of the day the roasted corn is threshed, stripped naked to plough and sow. The slack time for farmers is winter. Then they relish what they have struggled for, sharing each other's company and food and cheer, easy in themselves while the season entertains them, like sailors when their laden ships have come in and they garland the prows in the happiness of return. But still there is work to be done. The gathering of acorns, olives, the berries of the bay tree and blood-red myrtle. It is time to set snares for cranes and nets for deer, to course the sharp-eared hare and bring down the roebuck with hempen whirrings of the Balearic sling, while snow lies deep and the rivers chivy their ice. What need I say of the dangers which autumn brings? You can read storms in the stars when the days draw in and the heat grows mild, or when spring pours down its showers as the bearded harvest bristles in the fields, and grain swells full and milky on the green stems. When the farmer has already set the reapers to work, stripping the barley ears from the brittle stalks, I have seen winds swoop down from the darkened sky and wrestle each other over the yellow fields, the harvest torn up and scattered to the air, straw and stubble swept off by the swirling gusts. Often a gathering rainstorm towers overhead. Clouds heap up, black with showers, closing in the murky air, till the sagging sky bursts open and all the labour spent in ploughing and sowing is washed away. Ditches fill, the hollow riverbeds rise roaring, the sea breathes hard about the coasts. From the night of thunderclouds Jupiter hurls bolts, his right hand gleams, the earth shakes far and wide as the blow falls. Wild animals run for cover, men feel their hearts grow small with terror, the god strikes Athos or Rhodope or steep Caronia at will. The wind redoubles, the rain falls sheer, the forests and shores moan, beaten by the gale. Be afraid of this as the months change with the stars. Watch where the frozen planet of Saturn withdraws, and where Mercury wanders in his fiery orbit. But first of all, worship the gods, and offer to Ceres her sacrifice, spilling blood on the new grass at winter's end in the first fine days of the year. Then lambs are fat, and wines are at their smoothest. Sleep beckons, and the hills are heavy with shade. See that the young men the country round honour Ceres. Melt honeycomb into milk and soft wine for her. Let the willing victim be led 3 times round the crops, followed by a crowd, with cheers and shouts to Ceres to get her attention and call her into their homes. Before reapers set their sickles to the ripe ears, they must wreathe their heads with oak leaves, and sing and dance, so that Ceres has her worship, honest and uncouth. There are signs ordained by God, from which we learn what the weather will be, cold, wind, or rain, or sun. There are warnings, clear to read, in the moon's changes, a sign for the south wind's slackening, tokens which tell the farmer to move his cattle nearer their stalls. At the wind's rising, the sea lifts restlessly, fretting in its channels. A dry roaring is heard through the tall hills. The long whisper of the shoreline grows muddled, disturbed. The forest murmur thickens. Waves knock at the curved timbers of ships' hulls as if demanding entrance. Gulls swoop shoreward, crying as they come, and cormorants dip and play across dry land. The heron abandons the marshes where he kept watch and flaps high above the clouds. When the wind is mounting, shooting stars are seen. Their headlong glide whitens against the darkness, a trail of flame drawn slow and brief through the night. Chaff stirs and falling leaves dance on the air. On the water's surface small feathers scud and skim. When thunder and lightning trouble the whole sky, the ditches run full, the country is set awash, and out at sea all hands take down drenched canvas. Yet no one need ever be caught out by rain. When a shower threatens, cranes leave off their flight and take cover in valley bottoms. Cows look skyward, spreading their nostrils, sniffing the air as it stirs. Sharp flights of swallows scatter across still water. Frogs rasp their harsh old sing-song from the mud. Ants wear a narrow path as they carry their eggs from hidden storerooms. A rainbow bends to drink. Rooks rise from their foraging in disorderly troops, crowding the air, clapping their tattered wings. Seabirds and marsh birds that flock in the Asian meadow, picking about the pools of Caista for food, dabble their feathers, toss spray over their backs, or dash their heads in water and run at the waves, giving themselves to aimless joy as they bathe. The raven announces rain with tactless cries and struts in stately solitude along the beach. Young girls, as they sit up spinning late at night, can tell that a storm is in the air when the oil sputters in the lamp and grows a scurfy crust. Equally, there are signs which promise fair weather, clear sky and open sun after days of rain. The blunted points of stars take a keener edge. The light of the moon as she rises seems her own. Thin shreds of cloud no longer trail through the sky. Halcyons, the birds of Thetis, leave the shore, where they open their wings to the pale sun. Restless pigs stop tossing their filthy litter with their snouts. Now fields and hollows fill with low-lying cloud. The night owl, watching sunset from his high perch, denounces the change with unrelenting calls. Far up through the clear air Nisus floats into view. Scylla must pay for her theft of the purple lock. Wherever she faints and flutters as she flies, the hateful shadow of Nisus falls across her. His wing beat shakes the air. Wherever he shifts, she faints and flutters, starting away in flight. Now rooks caw gently 3 or 4 times over, through half-closed throats, debating with each other in their lodges high among the leaves, subdued by a strange well-being. They love it when rain has cleared and they come back to their young in the ragged nest. Their insight is neither God's nor nature's gift. They have no special knowledge of things to be. But when bad weather shifts and the wet sky brightens and the south wind drives the clouds in vast procession, gathering and settling, lifting and moving on, the animals feel a corresponding change. They look out at the world through freshened eyes. This is what it means when birds break into song, and cattle look lively, and rooks give throaty assent. If you watch the spinning sun and the changing moon, tomorrow's weather will never give you surprise, and the night, for all its stars, will not deceive you. If the moon, as she gathers her returning fires, shows blurred from horn to horn through the dark air, then farmers and sailors must watch for heavy rain. If a gentle blush spreads over her downcast face and reddens its pale gold, winds are sure to rise. If on the 4th day her look is bright and clear, and she crosses the night sky with horns unblunted, you will know for certain that all the days to come till the month's end will be free of rain and wind. Sailors, safe on shore, will discharge their vows to Glaucus, Panopea, and Ino's son Melicerta. The sun gives weather signs also, both at his rising and when he sinks in the waves. Observed in the morning or when the stars come up, they are equally sure. If he lifts above the horizon, checkered with spots, or scarfed in cloud, or dwindles to a hollow disk, be ready for wet gales blowing in from the sea, a south wind harmful to trees and crops and flocks. If at dawn the cloudy sky is shot with beams of splintered light, if Aurora leaves Tithonus on a couch of yellow mist and rises pale, what shelter can vine leaves give the ripening grapes when dancing hailstones rattle loud on the roofs? Remember to watch the sun when he hangs low in the western sky. At his setting we often see the colours change and wander across his face. Blue means rain, a flamy colour wind. But if dark spots are caught in his fiery gold, expect bad weather, a night of rushing wind and cloud, when it would be folly to put to sea. Let boats strain at their moorings along the shore. But if his face shows clearly at the beginning and end of his journey, there is no danger of rain. A dry north wind will be stirring in the trees. However the day turns out, fair weather or foul, rainless cloud or a storm brewing in the south, the sun will tell you. Who calls the sun a liar? He warns us of tumults, treacheries and wars, the trouble festering beneath the surface of things. Witness his pity for Rome when Caesar died, and he hid his face in a cowl of rusty cloud. We dreaded that the light would never come back. All nature was ominous then, earth, sea and sky. Dogs barked our doom, birds shrieked it from the air. Time after time the Cyclopes' furnaces burst. We saw walls of lava slide down over the fields and Etna's sides scattered with glowing coals. The noise of battle hurtled through the German sky, and the Alps shook with tremors unfelt till then. Breaking the stillness of sacred groves, a voice spoke suddenly out of all the air. Ghosts shimmered at nightfall, cattle were cursed with human speech, earth retched as its waters dried. The temple images, ivory and bronze, wept tears and ran with sweat. Eridanus, the river lord of my childhood, tore up forests in his anger, drowned the fields, swept off cattle with their stalls. In those dark days the entrails spelt a message threaded with pain. Blood sprang from wells. Towns, huddled on their hilltops, heard night echo the ululation of wolves. No time matched this. The clear sky shook with thunder, and meteors, never so many, blazed their portents. But the end, the struggle at Philippi, was as before, identical armies bent on each other's slaughter. The broad plain of Haemus glutted a second time with Roman blood, while calmly the gods looked on. In days to come, perhaps, as the farmer labours over those acres, and his plough turns back the soil, he will uncover spearheads eaten by flaky rust, or strike his heavy mattock against empty helmets, and gape at the great bones in their shallow graves. Gods and heroes of our country, Romulus, Vesta, guardians of Tuscan Tiber and the Palatine Hill, do not balk this young man, the hope of our fallen age, as he labours to bring us clear of ancient harm. Laomedon's debt was paid long ago with our blood. But the court of heaven grows jealous of your presence among us, jealous of your triumph, Caesar, and wishes you home. What place have you here, amid the wreckage of wars, where evil has plundered a sanction for every crime? The pruning hooks beaten into swords, the plough dishonoured, the empty fields running to waste. War stirs in Germany, stirs along the Euphrates. Our cities quarrel, break pledges, and rush to arms. A savage Mars makes the world his stamping ground. I think of how chariot teams pour out of their cages. The pace increases. Reins are useless. The horses run away with the driver. The chariot hurtles out of control.
That was Book 1 of Virgil's Georgics, in the translation by Robert Wells. The reader was John Franklyn-Robbins, and the music was composed by Michael Ball, and the programme was produced by Fraser Steele. And you can hear the second book of the Georgics at 9:25 next Tuesday evening.
And now, the Georgics. This evening we continue our reading of Virgil's poem on the art of agriculture and the art of peace with Book 2, where Virgil's theme is the cultivation of trees and vines. The translation is by Robert Wells, and the reader is John Franklyn-Robbins.
The fields have been tilled, the seasons marked by their stars. The theme is yours now, Bacchus. Quick-growing vines, slow olives, rich in harvest, and trees of the woods. Let my poem be your vineyard, Linnean father. Grapes weigh the autumn land, the pressed juice foams, the tubs stand brimming. All that is here is yours. Be present, Linnean father. Join in the treading, pull off your boots, stain your bare legs with the must. The rearing of trees varies according to their kind. Some come up by themselves without human prompting. The soft osier, the slender broom, the poplar, the willow with its grey leaves flashing white. To these the fields and curving river banks belong for miles. Some spring from seed, the chestnut, and Jupiter's tree, the winter oak, thick-leaved, the tallest in the forest, and the common oak, the oracle tree of the Greeks. Others, like the cherry and elm, send up an undergrowth of dense suckers from their roots. The Parnassian bay tree starts a tiny shoot in its mother's great shadow. So nature shifts for herself, and trees of all species flourish in woodland, orchard, sacred grove. Experience has taught that there are other ways also. One man takes cuttings from the mother plant's tender stalk and beds them in rows. Another stakes his ground with tougher stems, cut crossways or pointed for rooting. Some trees must have their shoots pegged down as layers, quick set in the earth about them and bent like bows. Others strike root however the cutting is taken. Their topmost prunings can safely be set in the earth. A seasoned piece of olive wood, cut from the trunk, nothing as it seems more dead, will push out a root. The branches of one tree change into those of another by harmless grafting. So apples weigh the pear tree, plums redden among the leaves of the stony cornel. The methods of tending the various trees must be learnt, and a farmer should have at his fingertips the skill of sweetening what is wild. No ground should lie idle. Let Ismarus be planted with vines. Let Tabernus be clothed with olives. Join me in the task, Maecenas. I owe to you the better part of my reputation and pride. The sea where I spread sail opens vast before me. I will not try to draw everything into my verses, and could not if I had 100 tongues in my head and a voice of iron. The coastline is ours to follow. The land shows clearly. Then trust me to avoid poetic fiction, its riddles, its long preambles. Those trees which raise themselves up into the day unprompted, though barren, grow flourishing and strong, sustained by the soil's power. But if they are grafted or moved and planted out into well-dug trenches, they will shed their woodland nature. Tended with care, they will readily follow the guidance that you give them. The same is true when a sucker that has shot up barren close to the main stem is planted out in the open, where the overbearing shadow of the mother tree can no longer reach to sap its power of growth. A self-sown seedling takes time to get established. It may yield your grandchildren a fine crop of shade, but the fruit will be poor and tasteless. The truant vine will hang its wretched bunches for the birds to peck at. There is never an easy way. The trees must be bedded in trenches, one by one, and tamed by your effort. Olives succeed best if they are grown from stakes, paffy and myrtle from stems, and vines from layers. The tough hazel, the spreading ash, the poplar, the tree of Hercules with its shady crown, and the oak which fed our fathers, all grow from suckers. Also the tall palm tree and the sea-destined pine. The walnut may be grafted on the rough-barked arbutus. Barren plains can be made to bear fine apples, and beech trees chestnuts. The blossom of the pear has whitened on the wild ash. Pigs have chewed acorns under elms. A distinction must be made between grafting and budding. Where the tips of buds push out from beneath the bark and burst their delicate sheaths, a notch is cut across the swelling, and a sprout from another tree implanted there to grow into the sappy rind. If the trunk is unknotty, the wood should be cut open and a gap split deep by wedges for fruitful slips to be put in. Before long, a vigorous tree will be spreading new branches to the sky and wondering as it flourishes how it came by such leaves, such fruit. Trees of a kind may vary. The strong elm, the willow, the lotus, the cypress of Ida come in different strains. There are several sorts of olive, all rich in yield, each distinct in its leaf, its fruit, and its oil. King Alcinous orchard has many kinds of apple. One shoot never gave Crustumian and Syrian pears. The grapes which cluster on our vines are not the same as Lesbos gathers from her Methymnian stocks. The vines of Thasos do best in a heavy soil. The vines with white grapes from Morea prefer a light one. There are Pisidian raisin wine and light-bodied Legian to blur your speech and send you swimming home. The Rhytic, the purple, the Pretian, which has the prize? But a taste of Falernian silences all debate. Eminian vineyards yield the best-bodied vintage, which Tmolian and royal Fenian might rise to toast, while the lesser Argite vine is second to none for its stream of juice, a flavour kept through the years. Rhodian is pleasant when dishes are cleared away and the drinking begins, so too plump grapes of Bumat. But vines are innumerable in their names and natures. Who could wish to reduce the variety to number? One might as well ask how many grains of sand stir and ripple in the wind of the Libyan desert, or try to master the sea by counting its waves when a gale from the east beats down the struggling ships. Not every kind of soil suits every tree. Willows grow by water, alders on marshy ground. The barren wild ash chooses a rocky cleft. Yews flourish on a cold north slope, myrtle on a seashore. Bacchus spreads his vineyards on the open hills. To the world's end, wherever ground is tilled, from Arabia to the land of the daubed Geloni, trees have their native places. Black ebony belongs to India, frankincense to Sabia. I think of the balsam tree, its sweet-smelling wood, its oozings, of the podded acacia with gummy leaves, of cotton that whitens the Ethiopian glades, and delicate silks that the Chinese comb from leaves. I think of Indian forests near the final ocean where the land curves back, bordered by trees so tall that no man can shoot an arrow over their tops, and yet that people are skilled in use of the bow. Media produces the citron with its bitter juice, its lingering taste. No remedy more effective against a jealous stepmother's cup of poison. It stops the drug and heals the body from within. The tree stands large and looks most like the bay. You would mistake it if it were not for the scent. Its blossom clings, and its leaves withstand all winds. The Medes use it in a rinse to sweeten their mouths, and give it to the old as a cure for breathlessness. But Media with all its wealth of citron groves, Ganges with its beauty, and Hermus fished for gold, cannot contend with Italy. Nor can Bactra, nor India, nor the Isle of Pangaea with its incense-bearing sands. No flame-throwing bulls have ploughed these fields, no clutch of dragon's teeth been flung from the sower's hand, nor crop of iron warriors bristled from the earth. Ours is a plainer story, of vineyards and olive groves, of herds well stocked, and harvests that will not fail. Across our fields the war-horse proudly prances. Here graze the snowy sheep, and the great bull victim which you, Clitumnus, bathe in your holy waters to lead the Romans in triumph to the shrines of the gods. Here spring is importunate, summer will not leave us, our flocks bear twice, our orchards serve us twice. We suffer no encroachment from lions and tigers, our gathered herbs are free from the aconite's poison. The monstrous serpent which pours fold into fold or lifts on his scaly coils is not to be found. I think of our cities, monuments, great works, our towns, so many, set high on their rocky cliffs, and the rivers gliding beneath their ancient walls. Of the seas that wash our coastline, east and west, our many lakes, you, great Larius, and you, Banacus, whose billows break with the roaring of the sea. I think of our harbours, how the waves chafe and seethe at the Lucrine pool's new-built defence. The waters of the port of Julius hear them and remain calm. The Tyrrhene Sea flows channeled into Avernus. Our land is rich in metals. She opens veins of silver and copper. Her rivers have turned up gold. The men she rears are a fierce breed. Marsians, Sabines, Ligurians, toughened by trouble, Volscian spearsmen, the Decii, the Marii, great Camillus, the Scipios, unyielding captains, and last and greatest name, yours, Caesar, conqueror of Asia from coast to coast, fender of the poor Indian from the towers of Rome. Country of Saturn, great mother of crops and men, for you I speak of an ancient, honourable livelihood, have traced my theme boldly to its hidden source, and fetched the song of Astra through the towns of Rome. I will deal now with the nature of different soils, their strength, their colour, the crops which grow best on each. Where the ground is an awkward mix of gravel and clay, the long-lived olive will flourish. The grudging hillside disowns its thorns and softens at Athene's gift. You can tell the soil by the oleaster rising thick and the wild berries that it scatters underfoot. But where the landscape opens in grassy levels, its soil benign yet clammy, made rich with ooze, or where a hammock, low slung from encircling hills, catches the sift of earth which streams have washed down from the bare ridges, or a southward-facing slope matted with roots of bracken waylays the plough, the ground will one day produce strong vines, a vintage running in streams, grapes that crowd to the hand, wine fit to be spilt in offering from a golden cup when the plump Etruscan has blown his ivory pipe by the altar, and dishes are heaped with the steaming bowls. But if your concern is with animals, the rearing of calves or lambs or goats that burn where they graze, you should look for pasture as far as wealthy Tarentum, or the plain of ravaged Mantua, lost to us now, where snowy swans browse on river-floated grass. You have water for your herds and turf to feed them. A cold dew on a summer night is enough there to refresh meadows cropped through the long days. A black soil that turns up rich beneath the plough and crumbles naturally as the tiller works it is best for corn. No ground will send wagon loads rumbling home in such numbers, slow drawn by oxen. Or land where the frustrate labourer clearing scrub has levelled the casual growth of years of neglect, roots wrenched skyward, nesting places destroyed, birds scattered to the vast air, and furrow by furrow the unkempt acres ploughed to a gleaming sameness. The loose, uneven surface of shaly slopes offers no more than low spurge and rosemary for bees, while flaky tufa or chalk, black vipers eat it, boast that for snakes no food is better than theirs, no ground so full of coiled recesses to hide in. But soil which breathes out a thin, soon-vanished mist, and drinks in moisture as it wants, or lets it go, which never changes greensward for other clothing, or crusts iron tools with scurf or salty rust, is the one that weaves vines quickly about the elms and bears fat olives, and as you will find by working it, is good for cattle, and gently suffers the plough. Rich Capua and the coast by Vesuvius know this, and Clanius, flooding Acherai's empty country. Let me tell you how to recognize each of these kinds. If you want to know whether a soil is loose or hard, for Ceres and Bacchus differ in their chosen ground, corn likes a hard soil, the vine a very loose one, choose a place where the ground has lain undisturbed, and sink a pit there, then fill it again with the earth that has been removed, and tread the surface well down. A looser soil runs short. You will know it belongs to cattle or vines. But if, when the pit has been filled, there is still some left which refuses to go back, then the soil is thick and sluggish. You need strong oxen to break it open and crumble the stiff-backed clods. To learn if a stretch of ground is brackish or sour, useless for growing things, unresponsive to ploughing, thief of the vine's blue blood and the apple's good name, this test will serve you. Take down a wicker basket or a wine strainer from its place by the smoky roof. Pack into it some of this bad earth mixed with water fresh from the spring. You will find when all the moisture strains out and falls in large drops through the twigs, that it carries the sharp flavour with it. Proof of this can be read in the wry faces of those who taste it. The simplest way of telling if a soil is rich is to work it in your fingers. Instead of crumbling, it softens like pitch when held and is sticky to touch. How fiercely grass shoots up where the soil is moist. But be on your guard. When the ground is too ready to bear, too quick in its strength, then the corn will go to straw. A close soil betrays itself silently by its weight, a light one also, and the colour, pale or dark, can be told at a glance. But a cold, delinquent soil is hard to discover, though these may give you warning: pitch pines, black-bellied ivy, damaging yews. When you know your ground and have heaped the trenches high, leave it as it is, with the upturned clods exposed to bake in the sun and freeze in the winter air, before you dig in the vines. A crumbling soil is the one you want, the effect of winds, fierce frosts, and the labourer swinging his mattock from dawn to dusk. Some farmers, unwilling to leave out any precaution, prepare a nursery for the rearing of cuttings, which is like the place that awaits them on transplanting, so that the slips should not think their mother changed. They mark the stems, showing how each turns away from the northern sky to face the heat of the south, then plant them out to stand as they stood before. So deeply ingrained are the habits learnt in youth. You must know if a vine belongs to the fertile plain or the sparse hills. On a rich, low-lying soil, plant close together, since a crowded vineyard thrives. On rising ground and the broad backs of hills, space out the rows, but at the same time make certain that the avenues square exactly where they cross. As a legion unfolds its long battalions in war, when the marching column has halted on open ground and is marshalled in order, a flashing bronze tide that sways and hovers with the war god's indecision before the deluge of battle covers the field. Let the vineyard be measured and patterned, lane by lane, not merely to feed an empty passion for neatness, but so that the earth will give equally of its strength, and the branches have space around them to make their own. You will ask to what depth the trenches should be dug. The vine I would trust to a shallow furrow, but trees must be planted deep, belong far down in the earth, especially the oak. This reaches with its roots as close toward Tartarus as its branches open to the sky. No winter storms will wrest it from its fixedness. It endures, a living landmark from age to age, burying the children that have played about its roots, and stretches strong arms with sheltering unconcern on every side to carry the burden of shade. Never plant a vineyard to face the setting sun. Never sow hazels among vines. Never take cuttings from the tender branch ends or from high up on the tree. What is close to earth loves earth. Never wound seedlings with a blunted knife. Never graft the fertile olive on the wild. If unthinking shepherds let fall a spark, it will fester slowly beneath the bark's rich cover, take hold of the trunk, slip upward, start with a crackle high among the leaves, and run from branch to branch, from tree to tree, with fierce mastering ease, till all the grove belongs to the whirling flames, and pitchy smoke clouds billow blackly skyward. But most when a storm has flung itself down on the woods, and a driving wind presses the fire before it. The trees are betrayed by their roots, and once cut back, earth cannot help them to be as they were before. The unblessed wild olive with its bitter leaf remains. Pay no attention when busy neighbours warn you that your vines should be planted out before winter's end. What chance have the slips of taking hold in the soil when the north wind blows and the harsh frost seals the ground? Spring is your season, when the white bird returns and the long snake writhes in terror from its attack, or that time in early autumn when the weather still holds, but the year dwindles and the sun shines without warmth. Spring is the tree's best time. They live for the spring. Look how the soil swells, craving the lively seed, how the fostering sky lets go his pent-up rains, and body to body, with an enormous quickening, pierces the earth to nourish all that she bears. The pathless thickets are resonant with bird-song, Animals return to coupling at their settled times. Warm western winds stroke the soft bellies of the fields, and in everything the sap rises with tender desire. Plants lift more trustingly to the sun each day. The sprouting vine, unafraid of southern gales or rain driven down by big winds from the north, pushes out buds and unfolds leaf by leaf. It must have been like this at the world's beginning. I think of that early time when things took shape in their first integrity. It was original spring, the whitening days unflawed by winter winds. Then cattle first drank the light. The earth-bound race of men rose up head foremost from stony fields. Beasts were sent into the woods, stars into the sky. Young plants could never carry through their task of growth if there were not this respite between heat and cold, when the sky looks welcomingly on the newborn earth. For the rest, wherever you plant your ground with cuttings, manure them lavishly, cover them well with earth, and bury rough shells or porous stones for drainage. These let water through, give them room to breathe and a chance to gather their strength. It is not uncommon for a farmer to make a cover of rocks and potsherds, a barricade to protect them from pelting rain or the dog-star's heat when the fields crack with thirst. When the slips are planted out, you must work the soil till it crumbles about the roots. Take a heavy mattock to burst the clods, or turn the earth with a plough, and drive your labouring bullocks between the vine rows. Prepare supports for the vines, smooth reed stems, poles of shaven ashwood, strong forks to set beneath. So steadied, they will learn to scorn the wind and climb from tier to tier of branches high up through the elms. When newly fledged, and in the first freshness of growth, the vines should be left alone. As they stretch in the breeze and race with unhindered speed through the clear air, they are still too young for pruning. Use your fingers to thin them, nipping away the redundant leaves. But once they have spread and taken hold of the elms and the stems have thickened, teach them to check their pride and to know their master. Let the reproof be harsh. Strip off the shoots. Cut back the too fast-growing sprays. Hedges should be kept in repair to shut out stray animals, but most when the vine shoots are young and untried by trouble. The worst of storm and sun cannot cause such havoc as casual inroads made by sheep and goats, forest-wandering buffalo or greedy heifers. A frosty winter which freezes the ground solid, or a heavy summer scorching the rocky heights does harm, but not so much harm as the teeth of goats, which leave a poisonous ulcer on the bitten stems. For its crime the goat is slaughtered on Bacchus's altar, and satyr songs are sung on the tragic stage. The children of Theseus offered the goat as a prize for clownish games in villages and at crossways. They played at balance on the wineskin, drunk in the fields. The farmers of Italy, true sons of Troy, sing bantering rounds in rough, uproarious verse, and put on outlandish masks which they make of bark. They fill their singing Bacchus with your shouted name, and hang little images of you in the tall pines. So the vineyards grow up and swell with ripening fruit, and the hollow valleys are filled in their long recesses, wherever the flushed god shows his honest face. So we honour Bacchus, according to his right, with homely hymns, bringing dishes of sacred cakes. The he-goat stands at the altar, led by the horn. We roast the rich flesh in pieces on hazelwood spits. But the dressing of vines demands yet further labour. The task has no end. 3 or 4 times a year the ground should be dug over, the clods broken up with the back of a mattock, and all the leafage thinned. Task follows task for those who work the ground, and year tracks year in a never-broken round. Once the vineyard has let go its last late leaves, and a cold north wind has broken the pride of the woods, the farmer, worried and eager, is already looking to the coming year. He turns to the leafless vines with Saturn's hook and prunes them back into shape. Be the first to dig the ground, the first to burn up the prunings, the first to move the poles under cover. Be the last to gather. Twice leaf shadow threatens the vines. Twice thick weeds and briars overrun the vineyard. Hard work is the only remedy. So give your praise to a large estate. Be content to farm a small one. There are still rough twigs of broom to be cut in the woods, switches of untended willow and reeds from the river. When the vines are tied and the hook can be put away, and the vine-dresser bursts out singing, his last row done, there is still the earth to be chivied and broken into dust. The sky god still has the ripening grapes at his mercy. Olive trees, by contrast, need little tending. When once they have taken hold and faced the weather, they can do without the curved hook or patient mattock. The earth by itself gives moisture for a heavy crop, if the ploughshare has loosened the ground and laid it open. Do this at least for the sleek and peaceful olive. Fruit trees also, as soon as they find their strength and feel the trunk firm beneath them, push out and upward with inborn force. They have no need of our help. Birds feast off blood-red berries in the unkempt thickets, and every tract of woodland grows heavy with fruit. There is clover to cut. There are pines in the high forest to feed our torch flames and widely fling their light. When so much is given, can men begrudge their labour? Take the commonest plant and reckon its many uses. How willow or lowly broom gives the browse of flocks, the shepherd's shade, the field hedge, the food of the bee. The waving boxwood of Clitoris, the pitch pines of Narix, how it cheers the mind to see them. And so with all landscapes where the harvest is innocent of human labour. Even on the peaks of Caucasus, the barren forests which the east wind breaks and tears with lively fury are rich in kinds of timber, each with its use. Cedar and cypress for houses, pine wood for ships, hardwoods which are turned and cut to make spokes and wheels for farmers' wagons, or laid as keels for boats. Osiers come from the willow, leaf fodder from the elm, spear shaft from myrtle and from the warrior's tree, the cornel. Taut yew makes Iturean bows. Smooth lime and boxwood, shiny from the lathe, take shape beneath the chisel and are hollowed out. The boats that skim the rough surface of the Po are built of alder. The rotten home oak opens and takes a swarm of bees to its hollow heart. What blessings has Bacchus given to set beside these? There is as much mischief as good in him. Drunken fury destroyed the centaurs, Reutus, Pholus, and Helios, wielder of the wine bowl, to club the lapiths down. Oh, farmers would be too happy if they did not live in ignorance of their happiness. Far from the battlefield they get their living from the even-handed earth. No palace will open its tall gates for them, no early visitors pour from the choked halls. Doors set with tortoiseshell, garments shot with gold, bronzes from Corinth. They will never ogle these. Never spoil the whiteness of wool with Assyrian dye, nor, for scent, mix cinnamon with good olive oil. Chance and anxiety have no hold on their life. The wealth they count is the slow pace of the farm, the secret freshness of rock hollows, pools and combes, the lowing of oxen, sleep stretched out under trees, good hunting in the upland meadows and woods. The young grow up uncomplaining, happy with little, respectful of gods and men. Here justice lingered, dragging her steps before she abandoned the earth. One hope possesses me, that the gracious muses accept the service of their passionate pilgrim, that they teach me to understand the paths of the stars, the sun's varying eclipses, and the moon's labours. What power it is that causes the earth to tremble, the sea to swell, break bounds, and settle again. Why the winter sun hurries so fast to bathe in ocean. What hindrance slows the tedious night. But if the secrets of nature remain closed to me, if the cold blood round my heart prevents such insight, let the fields, valleys, streams, rivers, woods make good my failure. Oh, where the landscape opens, Spercheius, Tagetus, where Spartan girls meet their god, the sheltered crannies of Hemus, oh, give me these. Shield me with branches, let me be lost in the shade. If the greatest happiness is that power of insight which enables a man to trample on his fear of death, to accept the fact of it and discard the myth, There is happiness, too, in the countryman's care of his gods, Pan, old Sylvanus, and the sisterly nymphs. The rods of office, the favour of kings or crowds mean nothing to him, nor faction nor brothers at odds, not the Danube oath that binds the Dacian horde, nor Roman policies, nor collapsing kingdoms. Want cannot craze him with pity, nor wealth with envy. What the fields and orchards willingly provide, he takes, not for his eyes the iron laws, the frenzy of the forum, the records of the people. Others may trouble the blind sea with oars, rush against steel, break into the courts of kings. A city may lie in ruins to bring one man a bed of sarin scarlet and a jewelled cup. Some hide their wealth and brood on buried gold. Some are knocked silly with rhetoric, some poisoned by the packed theatre's promiscuous acclaim. Some take pleasure drenched in their brother's blood, then wear out exile, searching for a land that preserves the sweetness they destroyed at home. But the farmer tills his patch year in, year out, with his crooked plough. His country, his family, his cattle, his patient team, he supports all these. And the year allows no interval. It overflows with fruit, with sheaves of corn, with young for the herd. It crowds the furrows with harvest and bursts the barns. Winter comes, time to gather and press the olives. Pigs leave their feast of acorns. The arbutus blooms. Autumn has spread the table with all its fruits. The vine has sweetened long since on its sunny cliff, and his children climb about him to catch at kisses, and his wife with homely modesty keeps house. His cows let down full udders, his full-fed goats lock horns and jostle on a battlefield of grass. On festival days you find him with his friends, stretched on the earth round a fire with a demijohn of wine. His prayer invites you, Bacchus. He sets up a target on an elm for his herdsmen to try their skill in shooting, or they strip and wrestle, matching their tough limbs. This is the life which the ancient Sabines lived once, and Remus and his twin. This made Etruria strong. From such beginnings Rome grew to all her splendour, and a city wall encompassed the 7 hills. In the age before the Dictaean king took power, before men broke faith and killed their oxen for meat, golden Saturn lived such a life here on earth. The trumpet that calls to arms was still unblown. The clatter of sword on anvil had never been heard. But we have covered an immense distance in our course, and the horses steam in harness. It is time to release them.
That was Book 2 of Virgil's Georgics, in the translation by Robert Wells. John Franklyn-Robbins was the reader, and the music was composed by Michael Ball. The programme was produced by Fraser Steele. And you can hear the third book of the Georgics at 9:25 next Sunday evening on Radio 3.
This evening we continue our reading of Virgil's poem on the arts of agriculture and the arts of peace with Book 3, where Virgil's theme is the beasts of the field. The translation is by Robert Wells, and the reader is John Franklyn-Robbins.
Great Pales, goddess of flocks, shepherd of Amphisus, woods and streams of Lycius, my poem is yours now. The stories which might serve to please careless minds have grown dull with use. Who needs to tell or be told how Eurystheus raged, or Busiris welcomed his guests, how Leto gave birth, or the boy Hylas drowned, or Pelops of the ivory shoulder won his race and his wife together? I must choose another path to win ascendancy over the tongues of men. If I live, I will be the first to lead the Muses captive in triumph from the Aeonian mountain, the first Mantua to bring you Idumean palms. I will build a marble temple beside the water, where Mincius winds his course in slow wide curves among green fields, and slender reeds edge the banks. There Caesar shall preside, the god of the temple. I will come to him, a conqueror dressed in scarlet. In his honor chariot teams shall race by the river. All Greece shall leave Alpheus and the groves of Nemea to compete in the games, quick foot and heavy glove. I will crown my head with a garland of clipped olive and bring him gifts. I can see now in my mind the procession to the shrine, the slaughtered oxen, the painted stage as it changes from scene to scene, the inwoven Britons who lift the purple curtain. On the doors I will set a battle in ivory and gold, the people of the Ganges beaten by Roman arms, the Nile swollen in battle and running high, and columns of warships lifting bronze-shod prows, the conquered cities of Asia, subdued Niphates, the Parthian turning in flight to take sure aim, the double foe defeated and trophy won by the same hand, and the conquests east and west. Statues will stand there, shapes of breathing marble, the children of Assaracus, Jupiter's descent, Tros the founder and Apollo the builder of Troy. I will show the end of rebellion, tormenting furies, hell's harsh river, the rock of Sisyphus, and Ixion bound by snakes to the racking wheel. But now, to the wooded hills and unkempt groves, it is hard, Maecenas, the task you have given me. Without your help there is no beginning. Come then, we must hurry. On Cythairon, on Taygetus, the hounds give tongue. Epidaurus, the breaker of horses, calls us, and the folds of the hills echo with clamorous assent. Later I will raise my verse to Caesar's wars, and spread his name in splendor as far through time as time has elapsed since Tithonus was a child. Whether a man breeds horses to win the palm in racing, or sturdy bullocks for the plough, he should choose the mother with care. The cow he wants has a lowering look, great head and brawny neck. Her dewlap hangs from her chin down toward her thighs. Her flanks are long, all parts large, even her feet, and her ears are hairy beneath her crooked horns. If her coat is patched with white, so much the better. She balks at the yoke and sometimes butts in anger, is more like a bull to look at, thick-set and tall, and sweeps her tracks with her tail as she walks. The best age for mating and for bearing young begins at 4 years, and ends before 10. The rest of their time they are unfit for breeding or ploughing. But so long as the lively spirit of youth holds sway, let loose the males. Be early to give your cattle the enjoyment of love. Let each cow have her calf. The best days are soonest past. Old age and sickness pull down all creatures from their defenseless prime, and time's encroachment only has one end. There will always be some animals you need to change. Replace these at once. Look ahead, foresee your losses, and choose new stock each year to build up the herd. The matter of choice applies no less to horses. The animals you select to keep as stallions must be treated from the beginning with stricter care. A young thoroughbred shows his nature at once in the proud ease of his movement, his springy step. He will lead the way, be the first that dares to cross a dangerous stream or to trust an unknown bridge. Empty noise will not scare him. His neck is upright, his head is neat, his belly short, his back broad. His breast flickers with muscle. Chestnut and grey are the best colours, white and dun the worst. If he happens to hear the distant clash of arms, he pricks his ears, his limbs tremble. He whinnies, and the red of his nostrils flares like furnace doors. Tossed up, his mane falls thick over his right shoulder. His back is furrowed where the spine runs, and his hooves ring as if made of flint when he paws the ground. So Silurus looked, the beast whom Pollux tamed in Amyclae. Such, the Grecian poets tell us, the horses of Mars, and the team of great Achilles. So Saturn saved himself when, surprised by his wife, he sprouted a horse's mane, neighed, galloped away, Hyperion echoing his dread of being found out. But as soon as a horse is touched by the reproach of age and disease, be ruthless, shut him away. Grown old, a stallion loses his taste for love and his pleasure in labour. If ever he enters battle, his rage has no more strength than a stubble fire, fierce, ineffectual. So take account of his years and his spirit first, of his other qualities after, pedigree, pride in winning, distaste for defeat. Look how the chariot teams pour out of their cages, snatching at ground as the young drivers start forward in breakneck rivalry. Hope and excitement empty their pounding hearts. They lean over slackened reins. They ply their whips till the axles burn with speed. One moment you see them graze the ground, the next flung up through the air as if they had taken flight. There can be no respite. The sand is thrown aside in yellow showers, and each would-be champion feels, hot on his neck, his pursuer's foamy breath. Erichthonius was first to join horses to a chariot, and stand in triumph as the wheels carried him onward. The Lapiths of Pelethron added reins, and invented the art of riding. They taught the horsemen under arms how to paw the ground, to curvet and proudly prance. What the trainer requires for either purpose, and both are hard to achieve, is a young horse, fast, full of mettle, no matter if another is the veteran of many fields, or claims Epirus or Mycenae for his country, or traces back his descent to Neptune's original. Once the animals are chosen, and the time approaches, the breeder's concern is to fatten the one appointed chieftain and lord of the herd, to wait on him with corn, with fresh-cut grass and fresh-drawn water, to give him strength for the presently exacting task, since a hungry father begets a puny child. But the rest of the herd he purposely makes lean. As soon as the stirring instinct sets them on edge, he keeps them short of food and drives them from water. He shakes them with running and tires them in the sun. The threshing floor groans under the tread of his cows as a breeze from the west scatters the winnowed chaff. He does this to prevent ease from silting their wombs and dulling the keenness of the furrow to receive. They starve, made greedy for the joy when it comes. Now it is the turn of the mothers for special care. The months pass. They wander loose in the fields. They should not be yoked and set to draw heavy wagons, nor forced to leap and jostle on the path, nor allowed to run, nor to struggle against fast-flowing water. Leave them untasked to graze the forest meadows, the borders of streams, emerald with grass and moss. Let them shelter by rock hollows and in the stretched shade of cliffs. There is a kind of gadfly which breeds in swarms in the uplands of Sela, and where green holm oaks darken the slopes of Alburnus. It is also known to the Greeks. Its sting is fierce. The sound of its whizzing flight scatters the terrified herd and fills woods and sky with bellowing along the dried-out course of Tanagrus. Juno, in her jealous anger, once sent this creature to torment Io, the heifer daughter of Inachus. The hotter the day, the keener the gadfly's attack. Avoid it when your cows are in calf by pasturing them at sunrise or when the stars bring on the night. After the birth, the calves must have all your care. Brand them to mark their parentage and the use assigned to each. Set some aside for breeding, some for sacrifice, some to be put to the plough to break fallow ground and cast it up in clods. Turn loose the other calves to graze as they will. But begin at once the training of those you keep to work the land. Set them on the right road early, while youth still makes them amenable, ready to learn. Bind a circlet of withy loose around their necks, and when they're used to this separate constraint, join them to one another by tying their collars, matching like to like, and make them walk in pairs. First let them practice pulling unloaded wagons, their light tread scarcely marking the dusty ground. Then weigh the beechen axle till it creaks and strains as they haul the bronze shaft, and the wheels ride forward. You may feed them on grass and the willow's slender leaves and marshy sedge, but while they are still unbroken, gather corn in the blade for them. And do not repeat the mistake of our fathers and milk the nursing heifers. Let the whole udderful go to those it was meant for. But if your concern is for battle with its fierce squadrons, or the race course, to drive your chariot where Alpheus glides past Jupiter's precinct, and to outpace its waters, you must first train a horse to bear the sight of men armed and ready for combat, to withstand the blast of trumpets, the screech of wheels, the harness jangling in the stall, exerting himself more and more to win the praise that he loves and the soft, commending slap on his neck. Make him dare all this as soon as he is weaned. Let his mouth yield sometimes to the novice's bit, though he trembles in weakness, ignorance, and youth. But when 3 summers have passed, and the 4th begins, let him learn to pace a circle, and order his steps with a clean, flowing movement and a ringing sound, till the task confines him. Then let him challenge the wind, gallop over open ground as if reins could not hold him, his light hoofs hardly scuffing the sandy earth. As the north wind gathers and sweeps down from its home, driving Scythian storms and rainless clouds before it, then small gusts seethe through fields of standing corn, shiver the surface of waters, stir the treetops to a louder whisper, and curl long waves against the shore. Land or sea is all one to the blast when it strikes. Such a horse will go all out for the winning post, sweating circuit after circuit, mouth blooded with foam, or will draw a fine carriage delicately harnessed. Once the breaking in is complete, let him eat coarse mash to strengthen his ample body. If you give it him sooner, he will not be managed, and too spiritedly refuses to obey the curling whip and the biting curb. To maintain the strength of your animals, be careful to guard them against the inward promptings of love. Your cattle and your horses are equally at risk. Let the bulls be sent off to graze deserted fields, on the further side of a river or ridge of hills, or else shut up in their stalls with plenty to eat. The sight of a heifer burns and melts their strength. Her presence makes them forget the grass at their feet. She stirs their rivalry as she stirs their lust, and 2 will struggle to win her, horn locked to horn. She grazes Selah's uplands, calm in her beauty, while with charge and countercharge they fight it out, the blood from many wounds darkening their sides. Crashes are heard as they fling themselves together. A furious bellowing fills woods and sky. They cannot share a stable. One or the other must yield, broken in the fight, and withdraw far off, taking with him the injury and shame of defeat. The love he has lost belongs to his proud conqueror. One last look back, and he goes like a banished king. Through days and nights of exile, brooding his return, he hardens himself with rough living, a bed of stones, a diet of sharp-edged rushes and prickly leaves. He learns how to make his horns declare his fury, and tests himself, butting tree trunks, slashing the air, pawing up the ground, as if battle had begun. Once he has recovered strength, he advances again. He rushes his enemy, catching him off guard like a wave which begins to whiten far out at sea, gathering behind it the lifted force of waters as it curls shoreward and roars across the rocks, a fluid mountain that tears itself from its base to topple and break in eddies of black sand. All living creatures are made distraught by lust. Man, beast, bird, fish. No species is exempt. Through water, earth, and air the same fire runs. Driven by lust, the lioness leaves her cubs to wander in random fury across the plain. The monstrous bear spreads carnage through the woods. The boar and tigress rage. And the lonely traveller through Libyan desert takes fear by the hand. Look how a stallion trembles in his whole body if he catches the familiar taint on the breeze. No reining in nor angry whipping holds him. No obstacle, rocky ridge or hollowed cliff or boulder-toppling river stands in his way. In the Sabine hills the wild pig rushes, whets his tusks, digs up the ground, rubs against trees back and forth to proof his skin against wounds. Remember the boy, love spilt its molten pain along his bones, who swam the stormy straits at dead of night, while the sky tumbled about him and thunder crashed and the crag-torn sea roared out. No care for grieving parents could withhold him, no care for the girl whose life hung on his own. Lust drives fierce wolves and dogs and spotted lynxes, the creatures of Bacchus. It makes stags turn and fight. But mares will surpass all these in wanton frenzy. It was Venus who set them on in Potniae when their savage jaws tore Glaucus limb from limb. They climb the mountain ridges, they swim the rivers. Past Gargarus, Ascanius, passion leads them on. And as soon as the flame has got into their bones, when spring comes back and their bodies feel the heat, they stand on high crags facing into the breeze that blows from the west, till, strange but true, it happens that the wind impregnates them with no stallion by. Then they break away, bounding across the rocks and down where the land unfolds in long combes that slope seaward, never running to the east, but north, or where black gusts freeze the southern sky. But what is the issue of this elemental coupling? A poisonous juice distilling in their groins, which shepherds call horse frenzy, and stepmothers use to beat with herbs while chanting magic spells. But time slips by, and cannot be reclaimed while we dwell on details and affection waylays us. Enough now of cows and horses. A further part of our subject remains, the care of sheep and goats. The work is hard, farmers, and the praise well earned. I, too, am at work, trusting in the power of language to open a narrow theme and present its truth. A happy compulsion which makes the labour sweet drives me across steep hillsides and empty uplands where no path runs to find the enlivening spring. Help me, Pales, to do justice to my theme. The first rule with sheep is to keep them under cover and feed them on hay till the spring grass starts to grow. Spread the floor comfortably with straw and bracken shaken from its bundles, and see that the flock is protected from frosty weather, or scab and foot rot will follow. You should graze your goats where leafy arbutus grows, and where they can find their way to fresh running water. Let their pens face south to catch the winter sun, sheltered from the icy wind that February brings, when Aquarius sets and the year goes out in rain. Goats should be no less carefully tended than sheep, and are equally useful, however high the price that wool may fetch when dyed with Tyrian scarlet. They bear more young, give a greater yield of milk. The pail that foams beneath a goat's drained udder stands fuller when next you press the spurting teats. But goats are good for shearing as well as milking. The white tufted beard and the shaggy pelt make cloth for tents and coats for shivering sailors. They graze the woods and ridges, content to feed on brambles and spiky shrubs in the crannies of rocks. They keep their young close, make their own way back to the pen, their udders scarcely clearing the floor. All the more reason, since they give so little trouble, that when the weather turns icy and blizzards blow, you should bring them under cover and fetch good hay in bales from the loft to see them through the winter. But when, with low-voiced breezes, the summer landscape calls out both flocks, the sheep and the goats, to pasture, set out with them early across the chilly fields. You share the morning with the sky's most vivid star. Dew whitens the grass, and the grazing is at its best. After 4 hours, when thirst has changed the freshness, and cicadas burst the thickets with their rasping song, water your flock, where the wooden troughs are filled with fresh supplies from a well or an undried pool. Shelter from the midday heat in a wooded valley, where a great oak spreads its branches against the sun, secure in strength and age. or a grove of ilex, dark-leaved, rests in itself, mysteriously shaded. Then let the flock drink again, and graze till sunset, when the air softens at the touch of the evening star. A dewy moon rises to refresh the meadows. The kingfisher calls by water, small birds from the wood. Need I set my poem to tracking the shepherds of Libya into their grazing grounds, where, from scattered encampments, day and night, from one month's end to the next, the flock moves onward across the face of the desert that stretches wide around and offers no shelter? All that he needs the African takes with him, his tent, gods, weapons, and at his heels his dog, burdened like a steady soldier fighting for Rome, who can pitch camp after a forced march and stand ready for battle before the enemy knows he has come. Not so for the tribes of Scythia by Lake Maeotis, where the cloudy Danube twists its yellow sands, or where Rhodope runs northward to meet the pole. The flocks are kept penned up in stalls. Outside, not a blade of grass shows through. The trees stand bare. The frozen earth founders under 10-foot drifts, and snowy dunes are blown into random shapes by the north winds stirring. No pause in winter there. Through leaden mist the eyes cannot see to tell whether the sun lifts boldly through the morning sky, or waters his horses at dusk in the crimson sea. Sudden crusts fasten across the river's current. Now water must bear the weight of chafing wheels, that heavy wagons trundle where ships once sailed. The cold can shatter bronze. It stiffens clothes on the wearer's back, turns pools to blocks of ice, freezes wine till an axe must be found to break it, and braids men's tangled beards with icicles. Snow falls incessantly, crowding the whole air. Great oxen stand unmoved, trusting in their bodies' slow heat to save them. Deer in a herd lie buried, their quickness gone, their antlers' points just showing. No need now for hunting dogs to track them out, nor red-feathered ropes to scare them towards the nets. Against drifted snowbanks the helpless quarry lies, struggling and braying, till hunters come with knives and heave the carcasses home with excited shouts. Their homes are caves, hollowed out deep underground, where they sit out winter in front of log-piled hearths, with a fire hot enough to burn elm trunks whole. They wear away the dark season, gaming and drinking, with beer and scrumpy to cheer them instead of wine. And so they live, prisoners of an Arctic sky, men of wild vigour, buffeted by the wind, that cannot reach their flesh through the tawny furs. If you keep a flock full of wool, avoid rich pastures, or ground overgrown with prickly shrubs, burrs, thistles. Choose your sheep for their fine, unspotted fleeces. Take care with the ram. He may be of the purest white, but if his tongue shows black under his moist palate, the lambs he fathers will be born with patched coats. Turn him away, and search the fields for another. With the lure of a gleaming fleece, so the story has it, Arcadian Pan once tricked you, goddess of the moon. You came at his call, he caught you deep in the woods. If it is milk that you want, gather clover or trefoil and put it in the pens by forkfuls, mixed with salt. This raises the flock's thirst, distends their udders, and adds subtly to the flavour of the milk. Some goat herds wean kids early and keep them from sucking by fastening a spiked muzzle round their mouths. At night the milk of the morning is curded and pressed. This they keep. But cheese from the evening milking is sent next day to market fresh in its baskets, or seasoned with a touch of salt and laid by for winter. You must make it your concern to keep good dogs, pedigree mastiffs, hounds from Sparta, bred up on fattening whey. Such guards as these at night will spare you worries, a thief in the outbuildings, the attack of mountain robbers, or prowling wolves. With your dogs you may hunt the timorous wild ass, the hind with her springy step, or the bounding hare. Their barking starts the boar from his muddy covert, or sends the great stag plunging across the hillside, bulky in his grace, and chides him into the nets. To clear your stables of vermin, burn scented cedar. Drive stinking water snakes off with resinous fumes. A viper may slide beneath the uncleaned pens, and curl there, scared of daylight, dangerous to touch. Or an adder, the kind that loves closed shady places, that sucks at the teats of cows and scatters poison, may hug the ground. Quick, shepherd, grab sticks and stones, strike at him. Already his head and half his length have vanished into the ground, while the tapering coils of the tail unwreathe themselves and are drawn after. There is also the vicious snake from Calabria's hills, who stands erect on his body's scaly writhings, the length of his belly mottled with dark spots. While the rivers run in their courses above the stones, and rainy breezes freshen the earth in spring, he keeps his greedy hunting to the banks and pools, his black throat crammed with fish and chattering frogs. But once the mud-cracked shallows have been baked dry, he flickers out over the fields, his eyes discoloured, restless in his thirst, and terrified by the heat. I would not have him catch me asleep in the open, or stretched in grass in a cranny of the woods, when, his skin just shed, he leaves his young, or his eggs, and slithers from the nest, bright with recovered youth, and darts his split tongue, and lifts to face the sun. I will deal now with diseases, their causes and symptoms. Scab attacks sheep in frosty winter weather, when freezing rain has chilled and soaked them through, or after shearing, when the unwashed sweat still clings and brambles rasp at their unprotected bodies. To prevent this, the careful shepherd dips his flock, the ram with the ewes, plunging him in the pool. The stream carries him along, drenching his fleece. Or he rubs the shorn bodies with an ointment prepared from various ingredients, the bitter lees of oil, silver scum, natural sulphur, pitch, oily wax, strong hellebore, bulbous squill, or black bitumen. Once scab gets a hold, the most effective remedy is to lance the sore and lay it open to the air. The infection can only get worse by being hidden. Festers while you hesitate to wield the knife. No use sitting still and wishing the sickness away. Even when the pain of it races through their bones and has fastened on their flesh and set them bleating with its dry fury, the fever can be reduced by slitting a vein in the hoof cleft and letting it bleed, as Scythian shepherds do, or the fierce Geloni when they wander in Rhodope or the Thracian wild and live off sour milk mixed with the blood of horses. If a sheep stands at distance and will not leave the shade, or grazes dully, cropping the tips of grass blades, or lags behind the flock and lies in the meadows all day without moving, and is last to come in at night, slaughter her at once, before she spreads her sickness and makes the harmless flock suffer for her fault. As storm squalls run across the surface of the sea, disease comes thick and fast, not killing sheep singly. It scatters their bodies up and down the pasture, destroys the whole flock together, ewes with their lambs. The alpine uplands, castled with villages through Noricum and by Timavus, belonged once to shepherds. Disease struck years ago, but the pens are empty, the fields and hillsides run to waste ungrazed. That year autumn stood still in the plague-ridden sky, and brooded over the land with an ogreish glare. It killed every kind of beast, the wild and the tame, polluted the waters, poisoned the grazing grounds. Death was not quick nor clean. A thirst like fire ran through the stricken creatures and huddled their limbs. The dryness passed, then a dropsy washed their bones and drew the softening substance into itself. The victim ox, standing at the altar, crowned with the white woolen circlet of sacrifice, broke the slow ceremony and fell down dying. Or if he fell to the priest's knife at his throat, the altar fire would not burn beneath the entrails, and the seer, when consulted, could give no reply. The blood was scarcely enough to colour the knife, or stain the sanded floor with a watery trickle. Everywhere calves lay dying, shut in full stalls, or out at pasture, the rich grass all about them. Quiet-tempered dogs ran mad. A wheezing cough shook pigs through their whole bulk and choked their breathing. Even the champion racehorse lost his courage, refused grass and water, listlessly pawed the ground. His ears drooped, and a fitful sweat broke out there. The sweat turned chilly, a fatal sign, and his skin felt dry and hard beneath the hand that stroked it. These were the symptoms that horses showed in the first days. But as the disease gathered strength to make an end, their breath was fetched deep down, came heavy with groans. Their eyes began to blaze, and their flanks to heave with long-drawn sobs. Blood ran black from their nostrils. Their tongues grew rough and stuck in their swollen throats. Wine gave them relief at first, poured through a horn, but the hope was momentary. The effect of the draught was to bring them nearer death, stoking their fever and filling them with false strength. God give such strength to makers of mischief, keep it from all good men. And they bit and tore at themselves with naked teeth. Steaming under the weight of the plough, the bullock collapsed. Blood mixed with foam slid from his mouth. He groaned life out. What else could the ploughman do but unyoke the grieving partner and lead him away, leaving the furrow unfinished, the share in the soil? The steep shadows of the hillsides, the open meadows, the pouring of streams from the rocks to the low fields could not stir the animals. Their skin lay loose on their hollow flanks. A dull look thickened their eyes. They had no strength left, even to lift their heads. What good was it to have spent their lives at the plough? Though men may spoil their bodies with food and drink, stretched out like bloated carcasses at the feast, the diet of these was leaves and the grass at their feet. They drank fresh water from the quick-flowing rivers and springs. They slept the sleep of unthinking health. At this time only there were no cows to be found for the rites of Juno. An ill-matched, shambling pair of buffalo drew her car with gifts to the shrine. Men picked the earth over painfully with mattocks. They dug in the seed with their nails. With straining necks they hauled the creaking wagons over the hill paths. No wolves hung about the folds, or prowled at night looking for sheep to take. They had been subdued by a nearer worry. Timorous hinds, shy stags, wandered among the house dogs and came to the door. Waves strewed the beaches with the remains of creatures washed up dead from the sea like shipwrecked corpses. Seals swam up along the rivers, strangers after safety. The startled water snake bristled his scales. The viper lay sick to death, unsheltered in his winding hole. Birds found the sky no sanctuary. A gust of wind blew their light lives away. They died on the wing. No change of pasture brought relief, no cure given by Melampus, Amethion's son, nor Chiron, son of Philyra. The remedy fed the plague. It was as if a fury of vengeance had broken loose, bringing disease and terror from their shadowy place, to parade with her in daylight, greedily vaunting. The hill slopes and dried river hollows echoed the bleating of sheep, the ceaseless lowing of cattle. So many died that the stables were piled with corpses which melted in rotting heaps. Nothing could be saved. It was best, men found, to bury them deep in pits. No washing in fresh water, nor searing in fire would cleanse or purge the flesh. The hide was useless. They could scarcely shear the fleece, decayed as it was with sores and filth. When woven, the cloth fell apart. If anyone brought himself to wear such a garment, burning ulcers would break out across his body. A rank sweat bathed him, and he had not long to wait before the plague was shooting its flames through his joints.
That was Book 3 of Virgil's Georgics, in the translation by Robert Wells. John Franklyn-Robbins was the reader, and the music was composed by Michael Ball. The programme was produced by Fraser Steele. And you can hear the fourth and last book of the Georgics at 9:20 this Thursday evening here on Radio 3.
And now, the Georgics. This evening we end our reading of Virgil's poem on the arts of agriculture and the arts of peace with the fourth book, where his theme is the care of bees. The translation is by Robert Wells, and the reader is John Franklyn-Robbins.
Let me sweeten my poem with honey for its theme, the gift of the sky. Permit me now, my Cenas, to present for your entertainment a miniature state. I will give an account of its fierce-hearted leaders, its orderly tribes, their manners, their pursuits, their wars. Is the subject too slight? Who will slight a poet's pains if gods do not grudge him, and Apollo hears his call? First you must settle on a place to put the hives. Look for a sheltered spot, not used for grazing. Wind prevents bees from carrying home their food. Sheep and goats beat the flowers down. Wandering cattle scatter field dew and wear the rich turf thin. Keep away the lizards with bright green scaly backs, and harmful birds like the bee-eater and the swallow, its breast feathers stained by Procne's hands for a sign. These do great damage, snatching the bees from flight, sweet morsels to stop their nestlings' gaping throats. There should be water close by, pools green with moss, and a small stream running shallowly through the grass. Let a palm or a large wild olive shade the entrance. When the new kings lead out the swarms in early spring to claim their season, and young bees play about the hives, the slope nearby will offer shelter from the heat, and the spread branches extend a leafy welcome. You should bridge the water, whether a stream or a pool, with stones or leaning willows, so that the bees have a surface where they can settle, spreading their wings to the sun when a showery gust has slowed their flight, or a sudden cloudburst drenched and beaten them down. Plant herbs around, green cassia, powerful thyme and savoury with its breath that steeps the air. Let banks of violets dabble their leaves by the stream. To construct the hives, use insulating cork or a close framework of interwoven twigs. Make the entrances narrow, otherwise the honey will solidify in cold weather and melt in summer. Bees suffer from both extremes. It is not for nothing that they labour to stop the tiny chinks in their walls and to seal the crevices, binding the wax with a gum which they gather from flowers and keep for this special use, a glue more tenacious than birdlime or Phrygian pitch. It is said that bees will tunnel their homes for warmth in underground recesses, and they have been found in pumice rock and the cavities of hollow trees. Help them by smearing the gaps in their chambers with clay and scattering leaves over the top to keep them warm. There must be no yew trees growing near the hive, no fire where reddened crab shells are burnt, no marshy ground, no patch of foul-smelling mud, nor hollow cliffside, where a shout jumps back like steel as it strikes the rocks. When the gold sun has driven winter underground and filled the summer sky with resistless light, bees scatter among the glades and wooded slopes. They harvest the newly opened flowers. They hover and sip at the streams. Then, delighting in their instinct, return to foster their young in the hive, to fashion cells of fresh wax and form the clammy honey. When you look up and see a swarm on its first journey, floating skyward through the clear summer air, an indistinctness, a dark spot that trails in the breeze, watch it as it goes. Fresh water, leafy shade, their search is always the same. Take care, then, to bait them with the scents prescribed, crushed balm and lowly honeywort. Raise a sound of tinkling, clash Cybele's cymbals. You will find that they settle where the herbs are spread, and occupy the hive as if they had found it themselves. When a quarrel breaks out between two rival kings and the bees come out to battle, swarm against swarm, their minds restless, their hearts trembling for the fight, you can hear from a field away the raucous buzzing which upbraids stragglers, and a strident, broken note as if bronze trumpets were blowing calls to arms. Hastily the forces muster. They flash their wings and sharpen their stings and limber up to attack, gathering thick about their monarch's tent royal, and taunting the enemy with loud battle cries. So on a clear spring day they burst from their gates to skirmish across the open fields of air. They clash, and the battle fury echoes high overhead, then cluster into one great ball and tumble earthward as thick as hailstones or acorns shaken from an oak. Where the fighting is thickest, the kingly champions spread their glittering wings, great souls in little bodies, determined both of them to fight to the end till their last soldier has left them or the field is won. Yet their high passions, their desperate encounters, are easily quietened by flinging a handful of dust. Once you have stopped the fighting and recalled both captains, destroy the weaker one. Weakness brings waste, and leave the stronger to reign unchallenged in the hive. You will know him by the burning spots of yellow gold. Bees come in two kinds. One is better, of finer make, with scales that catch the light. The other has a dull look, is sloth's victim, and drags his paunch as he goes. In this division the commoners are like the kings. Some are shabby and dishevelled, like a man without water caught by a wind flurry on a dust-heaped road, spitting dirt from his dry mouth. Others flash and glisten. Their sleek bodies are patterned with flecks of gold. Their children are stronger, their honey sweet and liquid. It will take the edge off the sharpness of new wine. Season by season you will press it from the combs. But when the bees fly aimlessly, playing in the air, forgetting the combs and letting the hives grow cold, you must stop this indulgence, break their idle mood. It is simply done. Take the king and pull off his wings. When the general is crippled, the soldiers will not venture. Goodbye to the fighting field and the perilous voyage. Let them stay where the garden breathes its yellow bloom, where Priapus stands, old Hellespontine watchman, with a willow sickle to scare off birds and thieves. To make a proper job of it, a beekeeper must be a gardener too. He must collect wild thyme, pine seedlings from the hills, and flowering shrubs, and plant them with his own hands, and keep them watered. If there was still time, but my poem draws to its close, I take in sail, shift course, and make for the shore. I might speak of the tended beauty of orchard gardens, of the piston rose beds that flower twice in a year, how the endive relishes the stream it drinks, how parsley lines the banks, how the marrow swells its belly in the tangled grass. I would find a place, too, for the late flowering daffodil, the twined acanthus, the seaward myrtle and ivy with its white-streaked leaves. I remember seeing beneath the high towers of Tarentum, where Galisus flows, black through yellowing fields of corn, an old man from Coricus. He had a small patch of ground and little besides, no ploughing there for oxen, no space for sheep, and the soil unfriendly to vines. Thorn trees possessed the ground, until he planted white lilies, herbs, vervain, and slender poppies, a little kingdom. He would come in past nightfall and load his table with food, not a scrap of it bought. He was first with roses in spring and with apples in autumn. Before winter's end, while sharp frosts cracked the rocks and the streams ran chained by ice, he had coaxed the hyacinth to flower, and shorn it of the delicate bloom, and was scolding the late year, the unsoftening winds. He was earliest among his neighbours to restock the hives with new hatched bees, and to draw off foaming honey from the pressed combs. He had groves of lime and pine. His orchard trees brought all their fruit to ripeness, as many as they had promised in the blossoming spring. He would transplant trees into rows, though they were far grown. The elm, the thorny plum, the hardening pear, the plane tree that roofed drinkers with its airy shade. Let this memory stand for all I might say of gardens. But the saying must wait for others. I must hasten on. Let me speak now of that special instinct, not inborn, but given to bees by Jupiter as a reward when they followed the Curetes' percussive music and fed the King of Heaven in the Dictaean cave. Bees are the only creatures to share their young, to live in a common home by established laws, and to have their own country, their ancestral gods. Never forgetting winter, they labour through the year to lay up what they can for the use of all. They divide their duties. Some work across the fields, searching for food. Others, shut in the hive, compound the dews of self-regarding narcissus with bark-bled resin to build the foundation of combs and hang the clinging wax. Some lead out the young, their tribe's best hope. Others pack the pure honey, filling the new-made cells with unearthly sweetness. There are those whose job it is to guard the gates, to observe the weather, the approach of the clouds and showers, to unload those coming in, or else to join the ranks and drive the drones a lazy herd from the hive. What heat of labour! How the honey smells of time! Imagine how the Cyclopes fashion stubborn ore into thunderbolts. Some work the bull-hide bellows, others plunge the hissing metal in cold water. All Etna rumbles to the shock of hammer on anvil, as the hurrying team lift their gigantic arms in violent rhythm, and the iron is turned in the tongs. Set the demigod and the insect side by side. They are both of them driven creatures. A passion for gain compels each bee to its task. The old are employed as master craftsmen to construct and repair the combs. The younger come back weary in the last of dusk, their thighs yellow with pollen. All day they have browsed on arbutus, thyme, grey willow, oozing linden, lavender, fiery saffron, and leaf-marked orchid. All share their time of labour, their time of rest. At dawn they rush from the gates, no hesitance then. When evening gives the sign, they leave the fields as promptly, and come back to refresh their bodies, humming around the hive as they wait to enter. They settle in their chambers, the murmur fades, night deepens, and their tired limbs belong to sleep. When rain hangs in the sky or the wind sharpens from the east, the bees are cautious, keep close to home. They draw water in the shelter of their city walls, make brief forays and take up tiny stones. With these they steady their flight through the buffeting air like small boats taking ballast when the sea is rough. But of all the customs of bees, the strangest is this, that the pleasure of sex, its annihilating sweetness, and the pain of giving birth mean nothing to them. They find their young among leaves and scented herbs, gathering a new king and little citizens to restore the palaces of their waxen kingdom. As they wander, they may tear their wings on sharp-edged rocks, but will not let go their burdens. It is stronger than life, the passion for honey that drives them from flower to flower. Though their time on earth is short and crowded with risk, none of them survives more than 7 years. The race they spring from persists and gathers glory, and they die as their forebears died, that it should live. What is more, their devotion to their kings surpasses the prostrate reverence of Egypt and the East. So long as the king is safe, he unites them all, but once he is lost, they dissolve their society, break their handiwork, pull down the trellised combs. He is master of their labours and has their homage. They crowd around him, they carry him shoulder high amid fierce acclamation. Lightly they turn to seek in battle the splendour of a loyal death. Observing these patterns, their intricacy, their justness, some men conclude that bees, as they drink the air, draw in with it a trace of divine intention. They say that a spirit fills earth and sky and sea, that man and his fellow creatures, the wild and the tame, take from it the delicate stuff of their life. There is no dying, they believe, when the body fails, but released, the life leaps lightly away to its place in the depth of heaven, a brightness pointing the stars. Before you remove the honey from its treasure chamber, wash yourself well, and gargle to sweeten your breath. Bring smoke to drive the bees from their narrow home. There are 2 seasons for taking the gathered harvest. The first, when Tegete, the clear-faced Pleiad star, rises from the ocean. He cannot hold her back. And later, when she flies gloomily from the sign of the watery fish to set in the winter sea. Bees can become ungovernably angry. When hurt, they will leave their barbed stings hidden in the flesh, parting with their lives in the wounds that they inflict. If you worry that a hard winter may break their strength, and you pity their danger, be sparing in what you take, but fumigate the combs with thyme, and cut them back when empty. Otherwise, parasite drones will move in, and cockroaches swarm there to escape the light of day. The newt will feed unnoticed on the waxen cells, and the hornet look for the fight he is sure to win. Moth will make havoc, and the spider, loathed by Pallas, will curtain the disused doorways with loose-hung webs. The more their supplies are drained, the more eagerly bees work, the whole tribe together, to fend off ruin, still bringing pollen to restore the galleried combs. But for all their courage, bees know the worst of life just as men do. Disease may sap their strength. You can tell its approach by unmistakable symptoms. Those that are sick immediately change colour, and a lean, ragged look deforms their countenance. They carry the dead from the hive in sad procession, or else they hang at the entrance with clinging feet, or loiter in the hive together, unable to move, faint from hunger and stunned by pinching cold. They make a duller sound, a long-drawn buzzing like the south wind when it stirs coldly among woods, or the chafed sea, hissing with the undertow of waves, or fire as it heaves and roars in a closed furnace. My advice would be to set a sweet gum smouldering, and to give them boiled honey in the hollows of reeds, inviting them gently to forget their sickness and eat. It may help to add the flavour of pounded oak galls and dried rose petals, or wine thickened over a fire, or a syrup made of raisins from the Pisidian vine, or Athenian thyme and sharp-smelling centaury. There is also a plant growing wild in the meadows which country people call starwort. It is easy to find. From its matted roots it sends up a forest of stalks. The disk of the flower is gold. The surrounding petals have a purple glint beneath their violet blackness. Woven into wreaths, it adorns the altars of the gods. It has the rough taste of my childhood. Shepherds will gather it in the smooth-grazed valleys and on Meller's winding banks. Boil up the roots of this plant with sweet-smelling wine, and place them in baskets by the doorways of the hive. But in case your stock should be wiped out all at once, and you see no way by which to repair the loss, I will tell you about the Arcadian master's adventure, and how he discovered that the corrupted blood of slaughtered oxen will produce a swarm of bees. Let me trace the story back to its legendary source. From where the people of Canopus and Pella mingle by the generous waters of the flooded Nile, and farmers make their round in painted skiffs, to where the great river emerges from Africa, setting a boundary against the Persian bowman and fertilizing the green land with black loam before it pours itself out through 7 mouths, the whole of Egypt puts its trust in this art. They choose a confined space suited to their purpose and enclose it with 4 walls and a narrow roof. In each of the walls they make a slanted window just wide enough to let in light and air. Then they take a 2-year-old bullock with curving horns, block up both his nostrils, gag his mouth, he will struggle, but they do it, and beat him to death. The skin must remain whole, though the flesh is crushed. They put the carcass in the cell with branches around and beneath it, and scatter rosemary and thyme. This is done as the west wind begins to ruffle the waters, before the meadows get back their colour and growth, or twittering martins hang their nests from the eaves. As the liquid warms and ferments in the bruised bones, creatures miraculously shape themselves from the carrion. At first they are limbless, but soon they cluster in a swarm on buzzing wings and try short flights through the air. Then they break away suddenly like a summer cloudburst or a shower of arrows loosed from twanging bowstrings, when the light-armed Parthians stand their ground and fight. What god showed us this discovery, gracious muses? Where does it come from, our appetite for invention? The story tells how the shepherd Aristeus left Tempe, where hunger and sickness had destroyed his bees, and tracking the river Peneus, came to its source. There, full of trouble, he stood by the spring and spoke. "Mother, Cyrene, embodiment of clear water, is this what it means to be the son of a god? Could Apollo rest in Thymbra and let me be ruined? Is he truly my father? And what has become of your love? How can I hope for my promised place in the sky, when the proudest achievement of my life on earth, those arts of husbandry which my care and resource have scarcely mastered, must be set aside, abandoned? Tear up my plantations of trees with your own hands, set hostile fire to my barns, destroy my harvests, burn my seedlings, and take an axe to my vines. How deep my offence if these should win me praise!" His outcry came to her as she sat in her chamber on the riverbed, with her nymphs at work around her, carding rich fleeces as smooth and green as glass. Drymo and Xantho, Ligeia and Philodose, their gleaming hair tumbled loose on their white necks. Cydippe and blonde Lycorius, the one still virgin, the other newly racked by Lucina's pangs. Clio and her sister Beroe, the daughters of Ocean, with their dappled animal skins, their golden ornaments. Ephyre and Opis, Deiopeia from the Aeaean meadow, and quick Arethusa, her arrows at last laid aside. Among them Clymene, who sang the ballad of Mars and Vulcan, the deluded ambush and the sweet disgrace. From chaos on she untangled the loves of the gods, and lost in her song they drew out the delicate thread on their spindles. But again the cries of Aristeus struck his mother's ears, and the company of nymphs sat stunned on their glassy seats. Arethusa, the soonest to stir, swam up, broke the surface with her blonde hair, looked out and called back across the distance, "Cyrene, my sister, you had good cause to be frightened. It is your son, Aristeus, your darling, who stands on the river bank and shouts your name and accuses you through his tears." Then his mother felt a fresh shock of worry and answered, "Bring him down to us, bring him down, since it is allowed that he cross into our mystery." And she told the waters to draw aside and give the young shepherd passage. Like the walls of a mountain, the river parted around him, took him to its depths, and closed in a hollow above. He found himself a stranger in his mother's house, a place of caves, lakes, echoes, pillared groves. Dazed by the bulk of waters, deafened by the noise, and saw the rivers of the earth as they came rushing along their hidden courses, saw Phasis and Lycus and the spring from which strong Enipeus bursts away, saw Father Tiber and Anio green with sulphur, Mysian Caicus, Hipponus loud among rocks, and Eridanus, bull-headed with golden horns, cutting through the rich lowlands to spend his strength in the turmoiled sea, the most powerful river of all. Once he had reached the chamber with its stone-hung roof, and Cyrene had learnt the reason for his empty tears. The sisters waited on him. Some brought pure water to rinse his hands, some fetched soft towels to dry them, some loaded the tables with food and filled the cups. The altars flowered with incense, Panchaean flames, and his mother said, "Take a cup of wine in your hands and spill a libation to Ocean." With that she prayed to Ocean, the earliest of gods, and the nymphs, her sisters, who guard 100 forests and 100 streams. 3 times over she doused the hearth fire with wine. Each time the low flames flared to the roof of the cave. She cheered him with this omen, and then she began, "There is an old man called Proteus, a sea-green wizard who lives in the waters of Carpathus. He rides in a chariot drawn by a team of 2-legged, fish-tailed horses. He has gone to the coast of Emathia now to revisit his home ground, Pallene. Old Nereus and the nymphs reverence his gift. He knows all there is to be known. Past, present, and future lie open to him, equally clear. So Neptune settled it, and gave him a lumbering flock of gross, sleek seals to shepherd on the bed of the sea. Take him prisoner, child. Force him to say why your bees fell sick, and what way you may turn your trouble to good. He will give you no help unless forced. You must know that to him entreaty means nothing, but chain him and he is yours. With all his tricks he must yield at last to constraint. In the heat of midday, when grass wilts and the flocks gather in the narrowing shade and forget to graze, he comes from the sea, stretches out in a hidden cove and sleeps. I will show you the place. You must take him then. Once mastered by your grip and bound in fetters, he will baffle you with animal and elemental shapes, change in a moment to a tigress, a bristled boar, a tawny-pelted lioness, a smooth-scaled snake. Turn to sharp fire that hisses about your ears, turn to thin water slipping through the links of his chains. But however he varies himself amid crowding forms, pull the fetters tighter, my child, and hold him down, till, with a last change, his body recovers its shape, as it was at first when he lay unguarded and slept. As she spoke, she shed a heavenly scent about her, which bathed her son's body from head to foot and breathed from his braided hair. He stood transfigured. Strength filled his limbs. There is an enormous cavern, hollowed from a cliffside, where, wave on wind-driven wave, the sea divides and breaks among deep-set coves, a place where sailors shelter to ride out storms. There, among vast boulders, Proteus has his den. The nymph hid the youth in a cranny away from the light, and then withdrew and wrapped herself in cloud. It was a midsummer noon. The parching sun stood like a fiery keystone at the top of his arch. The rapid dog-star blazed. The meadows lay brown. Mud streamed and dried in the stagnant river hollows. Returning to the cavern as usual, Proteus emerged from water, surrounded by his clumsy flock, scattering spray as they frisked and rolled about him. They lay down to sleep here and there along the shore, while, like an upland herdsman watching his fold at dusk when cattle are brought in from pasture, and wolves prick up their ears at the wailing of lambs, he sat above them on a rock and counted them over. Aristeus waited, impatient for his chance. The old man had scarcely stretched out his tired limbs when he let out a great shout and burst from ambush and had him in fetters. Then, passionate to evade, the wizard tried all his magic, tried every shape, fire, beast, water, in a continual change. But when he found no way out and knew himself beaten, he ceased struggling, took back his own shape, and spoke. "What do you want from me, insolent young man? Who set you on to attack me in my lair?" "Let there be no more pretending," Aristeus answered. "You know who brought me here. You know why I came. Give me an oracle, Proteus, to explain my loss." At this the trapped seer's eyes rolled and blazed with emerald light. Angrily he ground his teeth. Then the story that had to be told broke from his lips. "An avenging spirit pursues you, crazed by grief, the ghost of Orpheus, calling for his lost bride. If the punishment that he gives you matched your crime, the troubles you suffer now would seem like joys. Remember how the doomed girl fled, how you ran her down in the deep grass by the river, and she could not see the enormous viper that lay along the bank at her feet. The dryad girls, missing her from their mountain dances, began to wail. From Rhodope to Pangaea, along the northern heights, by Hebrus, through warring Thrace, where Orythaea wanders in exile, the cry went up. On the empty seashore, Orpheus tuned his anguish to the hollow lyre, shaping his song to the pattern of her beauty, the absence that haunted him day and night. He entered Taenarus, the cavernous gate of Dis, and found his way through the black and fearful maze to face the king of the dead in his ghostly kingdom, where all prayers fail and hearts are dead as stones. He gathered an audience of shadows to hear his song, and made them feel again. From the crannies of Erebus they flocked about him like birds that hide in the leaves, when dusk or breaking weather drives them from the hills. Grown men and women, the strengthless forms of heroes drained of their brimming life, young boys and girls, young men set on the pyre while their parents watched, imprisoned beyond black mud and jagged reeds and stagnant water, the clogged stream of Cocytus, wound in hateful coils by the ninefold Styx. His music thrilled through the lowest pit of Tartarus, quieting the Furies, their blue hair writhed with snakes. The snapping jaws of the three-headed dog hung loose. The wind dropped, and Ixion's wheels stood still. And now, all dangers past, he had brought her back. She followed behind him, obedient to Proserpine, and felt the breeze of the world already in her face, when a passion for reassurance gripped his heart, a weakness to be forgiven, if ghosts could forgive. On the verge of day he stopped. Light dazed his will. Was she his again? He turned. He looked. He broke the harsh condition. In that moment his labour was lost. 3 dry crashes of thunder rolled across Avernus, and she spoke to him. Your thoughtlessness in love, Orpheus, has wrecked us both. The current of fate catches me. It pulls me backward. My blurred eyes swim. Goodbye. Goodbye. I am lost in a huge darkness. My hands have no strength, no substance to catch at yours. These were her last words. Like smoke that thins and scatters in the breeze, she was fading, vanishing before his eyes, was gone. He started after her, catching at shadows, with everything still to say. But the ferryman of Orcus stood in his path and would not give him passage. What skill had he to master this second loss? What tears, what song might win him the gods' reprieve? Styx lay impassably between her and her life. Month after month, for 7 whole months, men say, he meditated his grief among the cliffs and caves along Strymon's icy course with no one by. Tigers fawned on him. Oak trees followed to hear him. He sang as a nightingale sings in the poplar shade, keening for her lost brood of unfeathered young when a rough ploughman has found and pulled them from the nest. Perched on a branch, she returns on her song through the night, filling the landscape with long-drawn, painful notes. No love, no marriage rite could waylay his mind. Over mountains, rivers, plains he wandered northward, lost in a world never widowed of its snows, Eurydice's absence and the empty gift of Dis. Till one night of orgy, the women of the Cicones, furious that he stood apart from their holy lust, tore his young body and scattered it through the fields. They flung his wrenched-off head in the river Hebrus. The current rolled it through the land where he was born. Eurydice, he shouted. Nothing remained but a voice. Eurydice, her name still alive on his cold tongue, while from bank to bank the broad stream echoed his cry. Here Proteus finished, threw himself clear, dived down. The sea closed above him in a whirling rush of foam. But Cyrene stayed. She spoke to her terrified son. Your troubles are over, child. You have your answer. The disease has a simple cause, a simple cure. The nymphs Eurydice danced with in the upland woods have sent this plague on your bees. You must offer them gifts and make your peace with them. They are quick to forgive, and with prayer and worship soon put by their anger. But first you must learn the proper rites of entreaty. Pick out 4 of your handsomest bulls, the largest that you have at pasture in the Arcadian hills. Take as many heifers, the yoke must not have touched them, and raise 4 altars by the shrine of the nymphs. Cut their throats, let the sacred blood run down, and leave their bodies in a clearing among the woods. Then let 8 days go by. On the dawn of the 9th, give poppies to the ghost of Orpheus to make him forget. Sacrifice a black lamb, and go back to the clearing. You must offer a calf to Eurydice's reconciled shade. No lingering then, as he followed his mother's commands. He He came to the shrine, raised altars as she told him, led 4 of his finest bulls to the sacrifice, and as many heifers, their necks untouched by the yoke. The 8 days passed. On the morning of the 9th, he offered Orpheus his dues, and went back to the clearing. And there an astonishing portent met men's eyes. In the rotten bowels of the cattle, in their swollen bellies and bursting from their sides, bees buzzed and swarmed. In a cloud they trailed skyward, settled on a treetop, and hung from the bending branches like a cluster of grapes. Here is my poem about fields and flocks and trees. I made it while great Caesar thundered in war by the deep Euphrates, while he conquered, judged, gave laws to willing nations, and drove beyond earthly glory. All this time in Parthenope's kind city, I, Virgil, labored to strengthen my youthful art, who once made play with shepherds' improvised verses, and sang you, Tityrus, stretched in the beech tree's shade.
That was the final book of Virgil's Georgics, in the translation by Robert Wells. The reader was John Franklyn-Robbins. The music was composed by Michael Ball and played by Bernard O'Keefe, cor anglais, and the series was produced in Manchester by Fraser Steele.